What is up, and welcome to the Bruin Bible, the podcast celebrating UCLA football and all of its facets. We've got a good one today. We're going to break down the Pac-12 North, and no one else better to do that with than my guy, Carter Bahns, out in Oregon State. No, UCLA does not play Oregon State, but they're a foe that, if things could go their way, we could be maybe seeing in a potential title game if both teams are doing well. So, Carter, how you doing today on this fine Sunday?
I'm good. Weather's great down here in Corvallis. Today was the off day of the week for Oregon State at fall camp, so a little bit more laid back here in Corvallis, but we're gearing up for another week of football this week, and it's going to be really hot up here in Oregon over the next week. So I'm getting ready to fry out there on the practice field. I'm bringing lots of water and sunscreen for what looks like 100+ degree heat towards the end of the week.
Oh, man, hydrate up. How hot is it going to be in Oregon projected?
Right now, today it's only like 80, but we're going to crack the 90s over the next couple of days. And then we've got 100 Wednesday, I think 104, 105 on Thursday, about 100 on Friday. So we're not really used to this kind of heat up here, but I guess Oregon State's going to practice through it. They're going to stay outside. So we'll see how it goes.
Man, hot for Oregon. I did not know it got into the hundreds out there. We're going to be breaking down each team. We're going to be giving a win and loss projection for each team. We're going to break down the offensive and defensive player of the year, specifically in the North region. So if you don't hear Keaton Slovis or Dorian Thompson-Robinson for the MVP, don't be outraged. This is specifically for the 6 teams for the North. We're going to be starting with your team, Oregon State. Jonathan Smith, in his 4th season up in Corvallis, he's 9-22 career-wise. He's got a little bit of a quarterback battle going on for the Beavers that's turned into 4 men battling it out. Some interesting transfers and 2 linebackers returning that are pretty great. Kind of give me your assessment so far of Oregon State and how they should be, at least on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, it's a program that's going to rely on the offense to score a lot of points this year. I think that's kind of been the case really since Coach Smith took over 4 years ago. The defense is continually a work in progress, but they are continuing to progress, and they're getting a lot better. And kind of the success of this year's team, I think, hinges on their ability to take another step forward, because the offense is going to move the ball. It's going to score some points, as it has done over the last few years with all of the standout performers that it has. But if the defensive line in particular can take a step forward, and then if the secondary can kind of lock down in the pass defense, the sky's the limit for this team. I think you could be looking at a bowl team come December, which you haven't been able to say about Oregon State since 2013.
2013 is right. 4-man quarterback battle. You got Tristan Gebbia, you've got Golberson, you've got Chance Nolan, and you got the newcomer, Sam Neuer, who transferred in June from Colorado. What are you seeing from that quarterback battle? Who's leading it right now?
Really interesting addition to get Sam Neuer into the mix. Transfer from Colorado, of course, coming off of a second-team All Pac-12 season. He's a Beaverton, Oregon native, so he's coming home for his final year of eligibility. And it is an interesting addition, because you've got what appears to be a fully healthy Tristan Gebbia now coming off of that torn hamstring, and then Chance Nolan, who started in his absence last year. Those are 2 guys that were going to be the favorites to start entering the season before Neuer comes in. And now you've got what I think is a 2-man battle, really, between Gebbia and Neuer at the top of the depth chart. But it wouldn't surprise me to see Nolan push for some playing time. And then Golberson is currently out with a shoulder injury, so he'll miss the first month or so of the season. But he's more of a future guy that I think does have some potential to start down the road. But right now I'm looking at Gebbia and Neuer in particular.
Gebbia and Neuer. Neuer, very talented, like you mentioned, 2nd-team All Pac-12 last year. Dual threat guy. He's going to make plays with his arms and his legs. I'd like to see him fix the turnovers a little bit more. He did throw 7 interceptions last year as a dual threat guy, but him coming back home to Oregon, I think, and, really kind of standing out in camp. I think he's got a chance to steal the job there. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think you don't transfer out of a starting job if you don't think that you're gonna at least compete for that role at your new team, especially when you only have 1 year of eligibility left. But I really like his fit in the offense. Brian Lindgren, the offensive coordinator, actually recruited him to Colorado a couple of years ago before Jonathan Smith added him to his coaching staff. So the chemistry's there between him and the coaching staff, and he's already starting to build some connections with his fellow offensive teammates.
Speaking of offense, they've got all 5 offensive linemen returning. A combined 82 starts between the 5 of them. That's going to be huge for whoever is lining up at QB next season in Corvallis. A little unsure on the running back situation, but B.J. Baylor made some plays last year that I saw. I think he's an intriguing guy to maybe steal that job. And then the big one is the transfers coming in at the wide receiver position. Some explosive players there. Trayshawn Harrison, a transfer from Florida State, made some big plays in his 2 games he was able to play last year. And then you got Micaiah Tongue, who transferred from Georgia. I mean, those are 2 powers in the South that are now coming out and being Beavers next season. What have you seen from both of those guys?
Harrison in particular, you mentioned him. He was eligible for 2 games at the end of last season after he sat out that 1 year with the transfer rule that's no longer in effect. But in the 2 games that he played, he led the team in receptions in both games. He had the longest reception of the year was, I believe, a 56-yarder. He has that on his resume. And I think he's as good of a candidate as anybody on this roster to lead the team in catches this year. He's got a taller frame than a lot of guys on this roster at about 6 feet. Oregon State does have kind of a shorter receiving core, which is kind of interesting. But he's got a good height and speed combination. Just a really good athlete, and I'm looking for him to take another step forward this year and be one of those team leaders. As for Micaiah Tongue, he's got what you would expect an SEC athlete's body to look like. I mean, he's about 30 pounds stronger than everybody else in that room. Wow. And it shows, because when he's out there on the practice field, you're like, why is there a tight end practicing with receivers right now? And you realize that it's this redshirt freshman that transferred from Georgia, whose dad actually was a standout at Oregon State, Reggie Tongue, about 20-ish years ago. Beaver fans might remember him. So really excited to see what he brings to the mix this year and in the future, because he's got 4 more years of eligibility.
Sounds like the offense is moving in the right direction for Oregon State. The defense has been the issue under Jonathan Smith's tenure at Oregon State. There are some bright spots coming back. Avery Roberts and Omar Spates are the 2 returning tackling leaders from the Pac-12 at the linebacker position. So that is something great, but they've consistently ranked near the bottom in total defense and scoring defense in the Pac-12. Kind of give me your assessment on the defense and how they can be better this upcoming year.
Well, I mentioned it briefly at the beginning, but it starts with the defensive line. And that's pretty much, I mean, that's how it is with all teams, but especially with Oregon State running a 3-4 defense. The rush defense has just not been strong enough to compete with some of the more high-powered Pac-12 offenses. And I think you need really big, strong bodies on the line in a 3-4. And they just, to be quite honest, they just haven't had that. But bringing in Keontae Shad from the transfer portal, he comes in from Minnesota. He was a standout in junior college a couple of years ago. That's a guy who could step in at the nose guard spot right away and provide more of that strength and kind of eat up some space in the middle of the line and maybe help out the run defense a little bit, because giving up 5 or 6 yards a carry is just not going to get it done in the Pac-12. And especially on third downs, Oregon State's third down conversion rate on defense has been one of the worst in the Pac-12 every year since Jonathan Smith got here. And I think that is largely attributed to the defensive line. And so they've got to do a better job of getting off the field on third downs. And I think that starts with run defense. And I think that starts with the defensive line.
All right, here's the ultimate question, Carter. When all is said and done through 12 games, does Oregon State qualify for a bowl game? How many wins are they going to get this year?
I think so. And, I think it's the expectation among Beaver Nation that this team's going to end the drought, get to the postseason for the first time in 8 years. And um, hitting that six win threshold, I think would mark tangible progress for the program, because it's been a long rebuild since that 2013 year. We've been through 3 head coaches in the last 8 years now: Mike Riley, Gary Anderson, now Jonathan Smith. And Coach Smith's first 2 years, he showed improvement. There's an upward trajectory there. They took a step backward with regards to their record last year at 2-5. But I think a lot of that was kind of, that fluctuation that you see in a COVID shortened year. But if they hit that 6-win threshold, that momentum is going to kick right back into effect, and everybody's going to be excited in Corvallis. So I've got them at 6 wins. I think they're going bowling this year. The world's not going to end if they don't. There's not going to be, huge roster turnover. I don't think many people are getting fired if they miss a bowl, but that is kind of the expectation. That's the main goal this year.
I think they are going to make a bowl game. I liked what I saw from them. They beat their rival Oregon last year in a huge, cross-state rivalry game. I think that's going to build momentum into them winning 6 games this year. I'm right on par with you, Carter. I think they're going to make a bowl game. Is it going to be the most glamorous and big bowl game? No, but, with 5 offensive linemen returning, having Neuer push the quarterback battle even further, having Trayshawn Harrison out there who looked sensational in those 2 games. If they all build upon that and, keep it rolling, I think Oregon State really has a chance to be a team that does get bowling this year. So let's move on to the Oregon Ducks for next year. Mario Cristobal has high expectations, a likely top 10 ranking coming into this season. Quarterback battle going on there, but it's likely going to be Anthony Brown, the former Boston College standout quarterback. A lot of talent returning on both sides of the ball. What do you think about the Oregon Ducks in the North?
Most talented team in the conference, in my opinion, and I'm not entirely sure that it's really that close right now. Their recruiting over the last couple of years with Coach Cristobal has been off the charts, and as far as that program's history is concerned with recruiting. Getting those top 10 classes year after year, that's big. That's big for Oregon. And the question now is, can they translate that into wins? Because with Cristobal there, it's the last couple of years I think have been maybe a little disappointing for Oregon fans, not hitting the win totals that they expected, or that with the amount of talent they have that they should reach. And a disappointing loss from their perspective to Oregon State last year is kind of a testament to that. The year before that, it was a late season loss to Arizona State. There's just been one or two questionable hiccups every year that I think have some people questioning the ability to turn talent into wins from that team. But with the amount of talent that they have, I think they have to be the favorite to win the North. It should probably be the favorite to win the conference.
I totally agree. And, they're going to have CJ Verdell returning at running back. This guy has rushed for over 1,000 yards in 2 seasons in his career at Oregon. They've got their top 3 wideouts all returning in Red, Johnson, and Williams. Defensively, Kayvon Thibodeau is probably the guy you think of, initially when you're talking about defenders within the Pac-12. This guy's got a chance to be a top 5 draft pick. Was voted the best defensive lineman within the Pac-12 last year. And then you got a defensive back in Mikael Wright, who led the Pac-12 in deflected passes. Oregon's going to be loaded, and they're going to be tested too. Their second game of the season is playing Ohio State in Columbus. That's a game I will be sitting firmly on my couch for, watching with a front row seat to that. I think Oregon's as good as they, if they put all the pieces together, I think they could be as good as they want to be. I think that's a real statement there. And, if they are able to take the Pac-12 and let's say they do have 1 loss, they could be in the Final Four. And, do you think that's a crazy statement right there?
No, I don't think so. If anybody's going to represent the Pac-12 in the playoff, I think it's going to be Oregon. USC, maybe. I think there's enough questions about Arizona State that leave me to think that there might be enough hiccups down the stretch for them to not reach the playoff at their full potential. So I think Oregon would be my pick if you're picking a Pac-12 team that's the best suited, has the most talent to not only make it to the playoff, but to be able to compete with some of those SEC Big 12 teams that might be right there in the mix for a national championship.
All right, win total. They played 12 regular season games. Carter, what's your prediction on the wins?
I've got them at 10 right now. I look at that Ohio State game and I see a loss there. I think just going into Columbus that early in the year with some roster questions, Anthony Brown, is he the quarterback? What does the secondary look like? Pass defense could be a weakness for this team, and you don't want to have that problem against Ohio State, and you definitely don't want to have it against them on the road. So that's a loss for them, in my opinion. And then just with the inconsistency that they've shown in conference play recently, I wouldn't be surprised to see them lose at least one conference game, maybe two. But the floor for this team, I think, is 9 wins. I'm going to give them 10.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think I'm going to go with 10 wins as well. You can't chalk up a win against Ohio State, especially on their home turf. They're one of the 3 most polished programs within all of college football. So I think it's unrealistic to predict a win in that game. But, I think they can sniff around 10 or 11 wins. I think that's, the ceiling for this team. We mentioned Thibodeau on the defensive line, some beasts out there. They're going to have a bunch of returning starters on offense. I think when all is said and done, the Ducks do take the Pac-12, so I'm going to roll with them for 10 wins. Next team I got is the team across the bay from me right now out in Berkeley, California, the Cal Bears. Justin Wilcox returning for his 4th season. Chase Garbers, the most experienced starter in the Pac-12, returning 23 career starts from Garbers, and some talented defenders coming back as well. What do you think about the Cal Bears for the 2021 season?
I really like Chase Garbers. I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the Pac-12, maybe on the entire west side of the country. If Cal is going to take a step forward, if they're going to take the step forward that I think they're capable of, it's going to be him playing at a really high level. It's going to be the defense returning to the form that it showed a couple of years ago as Coach Wilcox kind of turned this program around a little bit. And I've been saying that Cal has the potential to be a breakout team in the conference for a couple of years now. They were one of the dark horse candidates. They were my dark horse candidate to win the North last year. Didn't come to fruition, but they've got that kind of potential. And if this experience and talent that they have on their roster, with now the coaching continuity that they've had since Wilcox has taken over, if that all comes together and they reach their potential, they're going to finish in the top half in the North.
I love it, Carter. I think this is a team that's going to be really competitive, and it's going to be a game you go into not expecting an easy fight. This team is going to challenge you. Garbers comes back. He's a competitor. 4 of the 5 top linemen from last year coming back on the offensive line. Their top 2 rushers coming back. Kakoa Crawford, the former Michigan transfer, he was their number 1 receiver last year. He's returning. The defense, granted, they do have 4 starters returning, but the defense has been kind of the one side of the ball you can really hang your hat on with a Justin Wilcox coach team. They've never finished below 4th in total Pac-12 defense. And they've got one of my favorite defenders in the entire conference coming back, Cameron Good. In the last 16 games, this guy has 22.5 tackles for a loss and 13 sacks. That's a 16-game sample size, too. So this guy is putting up numbers left and right. I think the Cal Bears, I'm going to go with a win prediction here. I think they're going to get 7 wins. Do you think that's fair?
I've got them at 7 as well. They're firmly in the postseason, in my opinion. I don't know if they're quite at the level of a Washington or an Arizona State, some of those programs that are maybe a little bit more established in the conference right now, but it's a program on the rise. Coach Wilcox, he's done a great job over his first couple of years on the job, and like I said, they've got a lot of experience on the roster, starting with Garbers, but really on both sides of the ball. There's a lot of starters returning who've been in their roles for a couple of years. So 7 wins is firmly within the realm of possibility for them.
Man, we're making great predictions so far. Let's move on to Stanford. This is the team that you could tell me somehow wins 8 or 9 games, and I wouldn't be shocked. And you could also tell me they win about 4 or 5 games, and I wouldn't be shocked, and completely miss a bowl game altogether. This is David Shaw's squad. They started 0-2 last year. They rallied to go 4-2. They won their last 4 games of the season. Returned 3 of 5 linemen. They've got a quarterback battle between Jack West, former highly rated recruit, and Tanner McKee, a sophomore out there. What do you think about the Cardinal for next season?
They're the one team in the North that I just can't get a good read on. And I think their performance last year kind of solidified that. It's a 4-2 record, but I mean, all of those games were close, and I could see them, as you said, this year winning as many games as maybe I could see them going as high as 7, maybe 8. But if I was picking wins and losses, I don't think I have them as a bowl team this year, which is really weird to say because David Shaw has this insane track record of 9-10 win seasons with that Stanford program, and he's built great culture, great tradition down there in the Bay, and it's just so weird to be talking about a Stanford team that might miss the postseason. But I think that's kind of the reality of the program right now. They're in the middle of this rebuild, and I think the talent's there for them to kind of take a step forward and maybe silence some of the critics and answer some of the doubt. But they're going to have to prove it.
I completely agree. The defense just hasn't been there the last few years in Palo Alto. They ranked 11th out of 12 teams in run defense. That's never happened under a David Shaw coach team at Stanford on the farm. I think their secondary is a lot weaker than what they've had in recent years. They have a guy named Caillou Blue Kelly who's kind of promising. Outside of that, I'm not ready to kind of endorse any of their players in the secondary. I want to give them 7 or 8 wins, but my gut is telling me they're not going to reach it. I'm going to go for 5 wins. You think that's fair?
I think that's more than fair. And yeah, maybe I'm just really down on Stanford, but looking up and down their schedule, I've got them at 4 wins right now, and that's probably the floor. But I have a few other teams in the North reaching their ceiling, and if those teams are going to do as well as I think they're going to do, one team's going to suffer because of it. And because of the questions and because of the inconsistencies and because of some of the lack of experience at key positions, Stanford could be the kind of team that suffers from maybe an Oregon State making a bowl game or maybe a Washington competing for the North title. I think I really would not be surprised if the Oregon State-Stanford game this year determines which one of those teams goes bowling. Because I think both teams could be around that 5 or 6 win mark. And they've played each other really tight in recent years. Stanford's got an 11-game win streak in that series. Oregon State's hungry to snap it. And that's the kind of game that could go either way, and it really could decide which one of them's bowling.
I think you're spot on with that. I think that game in specific will decide which team goes to a bowl game, but I might actually be favoring Oregon State in that game. I just think they have more talent on offense, the 5 offensive linemen returning, as we went over earlier. And I just don't think they would have a match in the secondary for a guy like Trayshawn Harrison based on what I saw in those last 2 games. So I'm with you. 5 games. However, when they play Oregon State, if that does turn to a W, maybe they are bowl bound. So we'll see about that. The next team is one of the more interesting teams, not only in the North, but all of the Pac-12. And I think this is one of the teams that can really challenge Oregon in the North and potentially make a title game appearance, and that's Jimmy Lake's Washington Huskies up there in Seattle. This is a fun team, man. Dylan Morris really showed out as a true freshman quarterback there last year, made some big plays that led them to 3 wins in 4 games. He's really fun. All 5 offensive linemen return, with all Pac-12 selection Jackson Kirkland returning for his senior year. This was a guy that could have been a top 2 or 3 round pick in the NFL draft, came back to Seattle. He's going to really help them out in the long run. Crowded running back room. What do you think about the Huskies, man?
Yeah, the Huskies they're firmly in the top 3 for me in the North, and I think they do have the potential to maybe win the division. It's going to be really tight between them and Oregon. But from what I saw from them last year in that shortened season and Jimmy Lake's first year, I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off with Lake taking over for Chris Peterson. Obviously, Peterson built quite the I don't know if we can call it a dynasty. I don't think he was long enough. I don't think he was there long enough for it to be a dynasty, but really built some good tradition in his few years there, and won a lot of really big games. That Michigan game, I'm looking at that as
Oh,
I mean, that's quite the matchup, and that's the same day, I think, the same week as Oregon, Ohio State. So two premier Pac-12 Big Ten crossovers. Going to be
yeah.
fun to watch that matchup. But yeah, Dylan Morris, I think, is one of the best young quarterbacks in this league. I was impressed by him in the small sample size that we saw last year. Their offensive line is going to compete with Oregon State's, in my opinion, as the best offensive line in the North, and maybe the best in the conference. So uh, great, great talent on both sides of the ball up on Mountain Lake.
Yeah, Cade Otton, too. He might be one of the best, not only tight ends in the Pac-12, but the country. Any UCLA fans listening, I'm very high on Greg Dulcich. I think he can potentially be a Mackey Award winner. This is going to be his, biggest competition within the conference for that award. That's Cade Otton right there in UW. Defensive side of the ball, Trent McDuffie returns. He was a, second team All Pac-12 selection in the secondary. Jimmy Lakes has really churned out a lot of NFL talent in that secondary. Byron Murphy, Buda Baker, guys like that, Elijah Molden as soon as last year. So he's really kind of, done an excellent job with the defensive side of the ball. I expect the secondary to be the same. What's your win total for next year for the Huskies?
I'm putting them at 9 right now. They could be a double-digit win team if they get that win over Michigan. I just think you put them up against Oregon, and that's a coin flip. That's a textbook coin flip, and that could be the difference between them going to the Pac-12 championship and then maybe going to the Holiday Bowl or something like that. But the floor for them is probably 8 or 9 wins. They've got the potential for double-digit. It's really just going to hinge on that Michigan and Oregon game, in my opinion.
I totally agree. And I think you can make a case that they could be favored even going into the Big House in Ann Arbor with all the turnover that's happened on offense for the University of Michigan. I'm going to go with 9 wins as well. Not a lot of disagreements between us on the win totals, but, man, we just think we're just probably smarter than everybody else. I'll just put it to you like that.
That must be it.
We're going to do Washington State last in the Pac-12 North. Nick Rolovich coming off of a 1-3 season in Pullman. Delora, the starting quarterback for Washington State. He looked solid last year. He did have some off-the-field issues that may prevent him from starting. Jarrett Garantano, transfer from Tennessee. He's got multiple career starts under his belt in the SEC. Is going to challenge him for the job. Max Borghi coming back. He is a staple of a running back for that team. He's 12 touchdowns away from tying the all-time record out in Washington State. What do you think about Washington State this upcoming year? Offense, they're usually pretty solid, but the defense is always lacking out there.
Yeah, interesting quarterback battle there between Jaden Delora and Jarrett Garantano. The Tennessee transfer, I think he's probably one of the more underrated SEC quarterbacks recently. He's got crazy numbers for his career. He's one of the all-time leaders in a lot of categories at Tennessee. And if he can come in and take that job from Delora, that says a lot about him because what we saw from Jaden Delora last year was pretty impressive too. Having Max Borghi at whoever is quarterback, having Max Borghi at their disposal it's so valuable. Having a guy who can do pretty much everything. He could run for 1,000 yards. He could receive for 1,000 yards. He could do both in the same year, and I wouldn't be surprised. And then a veteran offensive line there, led by Abraham Lucas. The offense is going to score points. It's an offensive-minded system with Nick Rolovich running that run and shoot. They've got the personnel for it, obviously being in an air raid system under Mike Leach. The defense, lots of questions. Jahad Woods returns at linebacker. He's one of the best linebackers in the conference, in my opinion. But outside of that, I really just don't know if there's enough playmakers to stop really anyone in the conference from scoring more than maybe 30, 35 points a game. So it's going to hinge on the defense for them, much like Oregon State. I think if the defense can solidify itself, they're going to score enough points to be in the game against pretty much anyone.
It's so fitting that Mike Leach took over this program a few years ago. I know he's no longer there, Rolovich is, but they play like a Big 12 team. They're going to put up a lot of points. They're going to let up a lot of points. They got their top 2 receivers coming back from last year, Renard Bell and Travell Harris, who both had over 300 yards receiving in 4 games. So these guys, they're going to put up big numbers on the outside for whoever is starting at quarterback. You mentioned Jihad Woods. He's probably going to be an all Pac-12 selection, but he's one of the only bright spots I can think of coming into next year. There's a huge reason they ranked in the top 55 in the country in the run game. Tough slate for Washington State. Give me your win prediction for the Cougs.
I'm going to put them at 4. I think it could be as low as 3, and I think it could be as high as 5 or 6. But they're not a postseason team, in my opinion. They're probably going to finish last in the North, and especially if a team like Oregon State's going to take the next step, especially if Cal is going to start to reach their potential. Washington State, I think, is the team that they beat to kind of elevate their win total. And it's hard to say that Washington State's going to get beat up on because they've been so competitive over the last few years. But I just think there's enough questions on the defensive side to make me worry about their ability to stay in enough games.
I'm going to go with 5 wins. I think their offense will get them to 5. I don't think they're a bowl team either. So I'll just go 1 win higher than what you have. I think they get 5 when all is said and done. Let's break it down. So we're both in agreement that Oregon, if everything goes right for the Ducks this year, they will be representing the North in the Pac-12 title game. Is that correct?
Yep, I'm right there with you there.
Sweet. So we will pencil Oregon in there for both of us. We're going to do an offensive and defensive player of the year specifically for the North region. Let's start with the offense. Who do you got as your offensive North player of the year in the Pac-12?
I'm going to take the easy way out here, and I'm going to go co-offensive player of the year. I just think there's 2 really good candidates there. We're going to start with CJ Verdell, who you mentioned is a perennial 1,000-yard rusher, one of the most talented running backs in this conference. And the only thing that could hold him back from having a monster year this year is just Oregon's wealth of talent at the skill positions. If they go running back by committee, it might limit his opportunities a little bit, but from a pure talent perspective, and from the fact that offense is as high powered as it is, he's going to be in a position to be successful. My co-offensive player of the year, and I mentioned earlier, I'm really high on this guy. It's Chase Garbers. Because if California is going to take that next step, and if they're going to get to the level that I think that they're capable of, Chase Garbers is going to be the guy that's leading them there. I know they have a lot of offensive weapons that could maybe carry the load. Christopher Brown Jr. is a guy that I look for to have a breakout year in that system, but it's going to come down to Garbers, in my opinion. And he's a great leader. He has a track record of winning. I know he's got an injury history, but when he's healthy, he wins games. So I've got him right there with Verdell as a potential favorite.
I love it. Verdell was going to be my pick. 2,000-yard seasons under his belt, as we mentioned earlier, coming back for his final run in Oregon. I've got to think it's going to be a big one. Garbers is a great one. He was my dark horse to win last year. I'm going to throw Anthony Brown in there, quarterback for Oregon. It's going to be, the offense that we all know with Oregon, very successful spread offense. And if they're going to reach the heights they need to reach, I think Anthony Brown needs to be exceptional at the quarterback position. And I think he's capable of doing that. So I'm going to put Anthony Brown there. Another one is, I believe, the Washington quarterback, Dylan Moore. Dylan Morris. I think if Washington wants to reach those heights that they have, I think Dylan Morris is going to have to step up and kind of be the preferred guy in pocket for the Huskies. So we got the offense out of the way. Let's move to the defense. Who do you kind of have as your defensive player of the year within the Pac-12?
I think this is probably going to be a consensus pick for us. I have this guy winning not only the North Defensive Player of the Year, but he in my opinion, is the runaway favorite for Conference Defensive Player of the Year. And I think he could win a lot of national awards too. And it's Kayvon Thibodeau at Oregon. He comes into the year as arguably the best defensive player in the country. You mentioned his draft potential as a potential top 5 guy. He's the leader of that Oregon team, and he's going to start to he already started to tap into his potential early in his career, but with a full 12-game season, I'm really, really anticipating just an absolute monster year from him.
Yeah, I'm expecting the same from Thibodeau, former number 1 overall recruit out of high school, went up to the Ducks from Southern California. I'm expecting double-digit sacks from Thibodeau in potentially his final year in a Duck uniform. Another guy to watch out for, Cameron Good, as I mentioned earlier, from Cal. He puts up huge numbers. When you got more tackles for a loss than games played over the last 16, you're doing something right there. Keep him involved. And I'll go Mikael Wright as well in the Oregon Ducks secondary. That dude led the Pac-12 in passes deflected. I like his chances. Carter, this was a lot of fun, man. Make sure to subscribe to Carter on 24/7 Sports. He does the Beaver Blitz, and he's got all your training camp needs on the Lodge. He does great work there at 24/7 Sports. We're so lucky to have him on. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to talk Pac-12 football. Ready to get back out on the practice field tomorrow and kind of ramp up for this season.